Imagine waking up tomorrow morning. Every news channel is covering the same breaking story. Donald Trump is no longer President of the United States. Maybe he resigned. Maybe he suffered a medical emergency. Perhaps Congress removed him. Maybe something even more dramatic happened. Within minutes, oil prices jump. Markets start to panic. Military commanders raise readiness levels. The question everyone immediately asks is obvious. What happens to the war in Iran now? Most people assume the answer is equally obvious. Trump is gone. Therefore, everything changes. But after spending past several weeks speaking with various geopolitical analysts and several think tanks, including specialists in US foreign policy, I came away with a very different conclusion. The market may be asking the wrong question, because the real answer might surprise you. So why does everyone think that Trump is the story? Let's be honest. It's easy to understand why investors focus on Trump. Every few days we see the same cycle: a threat, a military strike, a ceasefire, another warning, more negotiations, another strike. The market has become conditioned to react to Trump's words. Oil jumps, LNG moves, the media panics, shipping insurance changes. Markets now trade the headlines. It creates the impression that one individual is driving the entire conflict. But here's the question for you. What if we've confused the conductor for the orchestra? This is a bit of a thought experiment. I deliberately asked several geopolitical experts a rather uncomfortable question. Forget politics, forget elections, forget whether you like Trump or whether you disliked him. Remove him from the equation entirely. Would the war in the Middle East actually change? Not just next week, not just market volatility, the overall direction. To my surprise, the answer was remarkably consistent. Probably not. That doesn't mean nothing changes. It means something much more interesting. It means that Trump changes the rhythm of the conflict. He does not change the direction. There are 5 structural forces. Let's look at that. Because wars are not driven by personalities, they're driven by incentives. First, America doesn't want another Iraq or Afghanistan. Regardless of who sits in the Oval Office, there is very little appetite for another decade-long Middle East war. The political reality doesn't disappear overnight. The second point, military constraints remain. This past few months has seen the US expunge through a lot of its missiles, precision munitions, interceptor missiles, carrier deployments, industrial production. Those constraints exist under Trump now. It will exist even under J.D. Vance or even under any future president. The third point, Iran's strategy has evolved. Tehran doesn't need to defeat the United States. It simply needs to prevent Washington from achieving a decisive victory. That's a much more achievable objective. For Iran, its main objective is not nukes, it's not proxies, it's not missiles, it's not Israel, none of those. Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz, the biggest leverage it has, and it knows that. The fourth point, the Gulf states don't want a wider regional war. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, all of them ultimately want one thing: continued energy exports, stable investment, economic growth, and not another regional war. These countries are very wealthy, and they're wealthy because there is stability in their countries. What they don't want is instability, they don't want war, they don't want conflicts. And finally, the fifth point, geography doesn't vote. The Hormuz remains the Hormuz. The Bab el-Mandeb remains the Bab el-Mandeb. The world's shipping lanes doesn't care who sits in the Oval Office. What it cares for is that who controls these choke points. So let's explore what actually changes. This is where things become very interesting. If Trump disappeared tomorrow, the US would almost certainly become temporarily inward-looking. There's a new president, there'll be a new cabinet, a new National Security Council. Markets hate uncertainty. Iran knows that. Israel knows that. China knows that. Russia definitely knows that. That short period, it may be days, it may be weeks, this would probably be the most dangerous part. Not because anyone necessarily wants war, because everyone would be trying to understand the new rules. Iran would probably try to poke America further, but also it could try and hold back to try and gain more international legitimacy. But history shows that periods of political transition often create opportunities for miscalculation. That's where the real risk lies. Now let's explore the biggest mispricing. Here's a conclusion I didn't expect when I spoke to these geopolitical experts. Markets may actually be pricing the wrong variable. Every Trump headline moves the price of oil. Every Trump tweet moves the futures market. Every Trump speech moves volatility. But the bigger story isn't about Trump. It's that the conflict itself has become self-sustaining. Neither side can win. Neither side wants to lose. Neither side can politically compromise. That creates something we've seen repeatedly throughout history. There's no peace, there's no total war, it's a managed conflict. Temporary ceasefires, proxy attacks, limited escalation, negotiations, then the cycle starts again. So what do we make of this? Perhaps the biggest lesson from the past 5 months is this. We naturally explain geopolitics through personalities. In Gulf War I, it was George Bush and Saddam Hussein. In Gulf War II, it was George W. Bush and Al-Qaeda, mainly Osama bin Laden. So it's always easier. People make decisions. But history suggests long wars rarely continue because of one leader. They continue because the underlying incentives remain stronger than the incentives to end them. That's why I think the real question isn't what happens if Trump disappears. The better question to ask is what changes if the underlying incentives don't? Because the think tanks I've spoken with are right. Then the uncomfortable answer is much less than what most people think, that regardless of who sits in the Oval Office, this conflict will continue. Thank you.